In this video, we will show you how to prepare data which is obtained in REDCap for import into the CHAVI client. This is particularly useful if you have retrospective data that you want to enter into the CHAVI client. And we will show you some of the libraries and the techniques that we use. So the first thing that we are doing here is that we are using R and we are loading some libraries like tidyverse and lubridate, which allow us to work with data frames and dates much easily. The REDCap tidier is a package which has been designed to allow you to collect data from REDCap using API endpoints, and this makes it easy to write reproducible code. Finally, the library .env allows you to use environment variables which can then be utilized for further processing. This is particularly useful when you want to hide secrets like passwords, etc. from your main code. So here, for example, token is a secret and it should not be exposed, which is why we are passing it through an environment variable. The read REDCap command allows you to pull the REDCap data from the URL and the token that is specified. The make labeled command basically converts the variables into having variable labels. So for example, if you have gender labeled as 1 equal to male and 2 equal to female, when you normally import the data using the API, it will come as gender 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2 and so on. To avoid this and to make the analysis easier, you want to convert this back into male and female so that you can easily understand this. And finally, bind tables allows you to load these data frames from each of the form in REDCap into the environment. Coming to the patient data, let us first work with the patient data. So here we have the demography data in the demography form. The first step that we are doing is converting the date of birth from the age and the date of first registration that has been mentioned. So how do we know which fields are to be taken for each form? In order to do that, let us go back to the CHAVI client. So here is a CHAVI client and here is a patient data form. And if we click on this button called import, it shows us what are the fields that will be required in the CSV file that you want to export. Now, this allows you to import files in various formats. The most common will be CSV, that stands for comma separated values. So we need to have the center, we need to have the CHAVI consent, date of CHAVI consent, patient ID, gender, date of birth, date of registration, patient project created and updated at. Now please remember, these two fields created at, updated at are probably not required. And how do you know which fields are required? It is quite easy. Just go to the form and click on this add new patient form, and wherever you see there is a red asterisk, you will understand that this is a required field. So in this form, the only required field is patient ID. So if you just have the patient ID, it will be sufficient. The center name is of course required because this will basically tag the patient to your particular center. So let's go back to the code and see how it works. So first thing that we did was we converted age, which is a field which does not exist, to date of birth. We added the center. Now this is a unique UUID that your center is going to receive from the CHAVI server, and this UUID should be reference to all the data that is there from your center. And then what we did was we renamed the MR number variable to be patient ID variable to match it with the variable which is given in the export, which is located over here. After this, what did we do? We selected the variables that we wanted, and then we made sure that our MR numbers or the unique IDs match the format that is there in Tata Medical Center. Now for yours, it may or may not be required. Particularly if you are using a series of numbers, then this step is completely optional. We link this patient to a particular project, and this allowed us to basically make sure that the patient is linked to the project that you are importing. Now because this import is typically going to be used when you are going to import data of a particular project, say a head neck cancer project in bulk, therefore it makes sense to do this at one go. And then we write to CSV basically allows us to save this CSV file called a radglio patient data.csv. Now due to patient privacy issues, we cannot show you this CSV file, but once you have this CSV file, you should be able to import it from here. So if you go to the import button, click on browse to select the file and click on submit, and that will show you a list of patient data which is ready for import. It will also show you any errors that it encounters during the import process, as well as what are the data forms, data fields which will be updated as a part of the process. This remains the same for the diagnosis data also, but what happens when we need to go to pathology? Now if you know the link or the relationship between pathology and diagnosis is that pathology is related to diagnosis and diagnosis is related to patient. In CHAVI, every form except the patient ID gets a unique ID, which is a universal unique identifier or UUID. Therefore, we need to get this UUID from the CHAVI client after we have entered the data for the patient and the diagnosis. So once you have imported the patient data, then you need to import the diagnosis data, which you can do it here. And after that, you will click on this export button to export these two fields. The first is the patient and the second is the CHAVI diagnosis ID. Choose the CSV format to export it, and if we submit it, I will show you what the file looks like. So the file will contain two columns. One is the patient's MR number, which you just put, and this is a auto-generated, system-generated unique ID, which is the relationship of the diagnosis to the patient. Once you have this data, it becomes trivial to join the data for the further steps. So here what we are doing is that we are taking the data from the pathology form, we are selecting the fields that we want, and we are renaming fields to the particular type. For example, we do not have the field called diffuse astrocytic and oligodendroglial tumors as a field type, but we have histological type as a field type, so we take that. Date of histology, as you can understand, is the date. Pathology is the date form that we have, and pathology date is the original one. So this rename operation does nothing but just rename the column. Now we also need to make sure that there are fields where there will be lookups which are required. Now, what are lookups? Lookups are relationship to tables which exist in another database table, and this is necessary to make sure that the data is properly harmonized. In order to do that, what we need to do is we need to find out the corresponding information. So here from the REDCap data, I know that there are 4 or 5 potential variants of data choices for this field, and we need to find out the corresponding code for this in case of these diagnoses. How do we do that? So let's take a look at this diagnosis, which is glioblastoma IDH wild type. So if we know the histological type, so to do that, let's go back to the client, let's go to pathology, let's go to add pathology, and there of course we are looking for add histological type. Let us search for glioblastoma, and you can see there are various types of glioblastoma that are coming. So here is what we are looking at, the IDH mutant. Once you click on this eye icon, you will get the code. So this is the code that we need to import. There is another way to approach this, is to basically go to a new section called lookup data that we have created for you. This contains the list of all the lookup tables that are there in CHAVI, and our documentation system will show you where these lookup tables are being used. So if we go to the pathology, so this is pathology, you can see the same information coming. So glioblastoma, let's search for it, and you can see the variety of glioblastoma types that are there. You can copy the code from here. Please remember that we ask you to copy the code, not the label. Make sure that the copy is done properly without extra spaces, and it is case sensitive, so it is preferred that you copy rather than type it out. What about astrocytoma? Let's search for astrocytoma, and you will get in astrocytoma these all variants of different types of astrocytoma. So this is exactly what we have done, is we have, using case when, we have basically replaced the value in this histological type field. So wherever, for example, there was a glioblastoma IDH wild type, we replaced it to XH55571. Now why this specific code? Because this code is derived from the ICD-11 code, and therefore this harmonizes your data set with the ICD-11 code. The rest of the things like surgical resection, etc., are also foreign key fields, and basically because they are all same, we just use the same type. And after that again we wrote the CSV. So understanding the relationships for CHAVI is important, and in the documentation we have now got a section called lookup tables in CHAVI client, which tells us the variety of tables which are there for each type of lookup data. In addition, we also have the lookup data which are there. So lookup laterality, where it is used, which of the form which is used, and what is that name of the field in which it is used. This is also there. Finally, our backend actually provides an API endpoint for your client to look it up. Although this API client is available, it will not be accessible to you directly. It needs access to a specific API key which needs to be specified in the configuration, which we will be doing at the time of installation. And following this, your client will be able to update the data directly from the server at any point of time. So this is in a nutshell how you can use the import export system to get bulk data from a REDCap database.